It's a lot to talk about today, right? When I came up with this idea, I was thinking just one topic a day. I wanted to somehow tie it into the issues going on now politically to how it's going to affect your bottom line. But I realized I can't focus on one subject. There's too much coming at us at the same time. So I'm still going to, still that original concept. How does this affect your pocket? But I'm going to have to add a couple of things in there. And so one is I found out that Republicans have now are trying to push a bill through Congress to get rid of OSHA. And OSHA is what protects employees, right? If there's a construction site and people aren't wearing their hard hats and don't have harnesses, that site could get shut down, pay fines. There's even criminal penalties, right? But how does that affect you? Very simply, you're an employee, right? That's there to protect you. What happens if you get injured now? You file a lawsuit? No, not if there's no OSHA, right? And then the other thing is now the Department of Education. That looks like they're going to try to dismantle it. Now, I did write a blog post and do a video on that before of how that affects your student loan, so I will put that in the links below so you can read that as well. But that's another example. If you get rid of the Department of Education, you get rid of OSHA. These are all people losing jobs. There's the FBI purge. Now, apparently, they're doing the same thing with the CIA. But with the FBI, those tied into the J6 investigation, that's up to 6,000 agents. Now, let's assume no agents are married to another agent. So it's 6,000 families, right? So 6,000 homes, not just in one area, but obviously, throughout the country. They could have brought in other agents. So 6,000 agents, 6,000 people who maybe some of them have their kids in private school. Now they don't have the money to pull them out because these are not necessarily agents that are at the end of their career where they're going to get a pension. So where do they find a job? Will they take your job? What happens to their house? That's potentially thousands of foreclosures and thousands of leases with landlords that have to be broken. That somehow along the line affects you financially. Now, besides OSHA and the Department of Education, we have the issue of what seems to be the end game here. Not only shrink the government, federal government, but my theory is the less people in the federal government, the less bureaucracy, the more control President Trump would have if he has to go through less people. But more importantly, it's this push for elimination. Elon Musk has said crazy things like we should just get rid of all these regulations. Really, all of them? Can we just keep a few? But if not deregulation. Now, what happens if there's deregulation? Does that affect you in any way? Well, ever hear of the 2008 mortgage foreclosure crisis? That was deregulation. That's Wall Street running wild. Now, let's back up for a second. Ever go on spring break, Daytona Beach or whatever? Back in the day, I went to Cancun in Jamaica. That's where the college kids from FIU were going. What happens when you're at that age and there was no supervision? You ran wild, right? You did whatever you want. Self-policing didn't really work, right? Having beer for breakfast, whatever crazy thing you did during spring break. This is the same thing. It's Wall Street running wild. If there is no supervision, if there's no adult in the room, they are not going to do things that benefit you. They're going to do things that benefit them. And we saw that with the mortgage foreclosure crisis. Anybody, like they said, anybody with a pulse, anybody breathing was going to get a mortgage. And they were being put into mortgages they couldn't afford. The documents were not being explained. And all of a sudden, you have an interest only mortgage, and all of a sudden it blows up, and you're like, why am I paying double and triple? Oh, because now you're paying the principal as well. What happened? All that happened at the same time, hence the mortgage foreclosure crisis. What did that do to property values? Bottom out, tanked out. So I got rid of my home. I said, what do I want this? It's just not worth it anymore. So I went into a voluntary foreclosure. Did I have any idea this was going to happen to me? No, of course not. But that's what the deregulation happens. It affected everything. Property values in certain areas like Naples, Florida was dropping 70, 80%. I think Miami was 50%. So it affects you because if you were going to get a home equity line of credit to redo your bathroom, guess what? You can't do it anymore if your home's lost 50, 60, 70% of its value. So all of this affects you. Now, I'm going to tie into another one on how this affects you. President Trump yesterday, meeting with Netanyahu, talked about rebuilding the Gaza Strip and that the U.S. will take over and, build and all whatever stuff he said to describe the area. Now, let's go back a little bit. During, I believe, President Trump's first, and I think it was the Associated Press, did a screenshot with a new article saying how Jared Kushner thought that would be a great area to develop, like for tourism and all that, hotels, casinos, you name it, right? We're talking about the Gaza Strip here. We're not talking, a little corridor along the East Coast of the United States, like the boardwalk in New Jersey or anything like that. Now, Jared Kushner has a long history with Netanyahu. Look it up. Netanyahu stayed at his father's house. Netanyahu knows his father, who I believe was given some sort of cushy uh, job in Greece. I think is where they shipped him. No, Greece. I'm sorry, it was Kimberly Guilfoyle. Where did they send his father? Well, he's ambassador to somewhere. I forgot where, but staying at a palace basically. So easy gig if you can get it right. But they go way back. Now, how does this affect you financially? Well, number one, corruption is always going to affect your corruption. Never trickles down, right? There's a word from the '80s and Reagan. Never trickles down to you and me. That stays up at the top, right? What comes down, you don't want to know. But construction contracts, lucrative contracts, uh, rebuilding this general area. Have we seen that before? Yeah, Bush Cheney, Halliburton, no bid contracts, redeveloping the area of Iraq that they destroyed. Good work if you can get it right. Blow up a place and then come in and fix it and get paid for it. It's good work. It's brilliant actually financially if you think about it. Why would this be any different? Especially if there's history between Netanyahu and the Kushner family. Kushner, of course, married into Trump's family. It's all very incestuous, isn't it? Now, how does that affect you? During that time, I remember it was so hard to get concrete. I literally had to pay off a guy at Home Depot because I had to get concrete posts. So even trying to get a bag of concrete was impossible. So I paid a guy $20. I go, I need it every time comes in, let me know so I can get more concrete. So I was jumping to the front of the line, but I had to pay for it, which cost me more money. But all that concrete was being shipped out to Iraq. It's part of their rebuilding. Now, read the history of Halliburton, Dick Cheney, the no bid contracts. I mean, literally, a Coke was $5, whatever the numbers were. It was just ridiculous because Halliburton was buying everything and then selling it back. So their profit margin was astronomical. It was well known that back then secretaries were making $100,000 a year. I had a friend who thought about going out there as a police officer, and I was like, all right, do what you want. He didn't do it, but he knew it would have been enough 1 year work there to pay off his mortgage. Granted, they were paid a fortune, but they were paying a fortune for everything too. But that shortage, whether it's concrete or lumber coming now from Canada, which is of course getting taxed higher, right, because of these tariffs. So on pause for 30 days. But if the lumber's more, construction materials more, concrete is more, and now we're sending it overseas to rebuild an area that's been destroyed because of corruption between two heads of government, that creates a shortage. And when there's that shortage, what happens? The price goes up. Very simply, the law of supply and demand. So, what is the point of all these podcasts I'm doing? Is just that for you, so you're not surprised, so you're not shocked when you go somewhere. And go, why is this up? Now, eggs is simple, right? We got the aviary flu, so it makes sense. We have to cut back until we figure this out. So, of course, there's going to be a shortage. But if you go buy a bag of concrete because you're putting up a post, I'm still putting up fence posts on my property. Like, how did I get from $2 to $6? What happened here? I could tell you the wood at Home Depot for the fence posts have been climbing up steadily for a while now. I think I started paying $6.98 if I remember correctly. I'm close to $9 now. So doesn't really mean much if it's one post, but if you have to buy 50 posts, $3 more, that's $150 right there. So it's all these little things that I want you to pay attention to. And now's the whole point of this. You know, The media is focusing on the hot topic today, and there's a lot of in between, especially when it comes to your personal finances, your economy, your bottom line, your pocket, your wallet, that they're not going to discuss. And that's where I hope to fill in that gap. And the reason I say this is just to keep saying, be informed. It's not just, oh, look, President Trump says the country is going to rebuild Gaza. By the way, where did the money come from that all of a sudden? Where do we get money for that? We seem to have money for nothing, but we have money for that. But my point is not just read the news and say, oh, look, they're doing that, and then maybe get upset because you realize it's corruption. It's one simple question: how does this affect me? So when you read about the FBI purge, up to 6,000, up to one fifth of the department is going to be replaced, potentially, or fired. That's going to affect someone's bottom line, and that just trickles. Talk about trickle down economics. That's where you feel trickle down economics. It's not the rich giving the money to the poor, but it's going to be the expenses and the debt that does carry over. That's where you start to feel all this. The Department of Education, I had, like I said, I wrote about this maybe 2, 3 months ago. How's it going to affect student loans? It probably wouldn't. It's just going to get transferred to another department. They're not going to give up on that money, but they might be a lot more aggressive in pursuing you. And so that's why I've always said, is now the time to buy a new car because you're concerned about the Trump tariffs. Because if your grocery bills goes up, your utilities go up. The people up north getting letters from their utility company saying that their costs are going to go up because of these tariffs. Because Canada does provide the northern part of the United States certain spots, I think like Maine, for example, with energy, and of course the lumber, which I've mentioned before. But all those little things tied in together ultimately will affect you, and that's the important message. How is this going to affect me? I'll give you one more example before I go here. If you get rid of 6,000 FBI agents, background checks take almost up to 2 years. It's 12 to 18 months. These are thorough, you don't want any clown working at the FBI. So it should be a thorough investigation. But if you get rid of 6,000 agents just like that, imagine doing that in a police force, you have to replace those agents somehow, right? Because those agents are working undercover. They're doing, a lot of good work out there, whatever it is, whether investigating financial crimes, maybe infiltrating a white supremacy group, they get pulled out, right? They're now unemployed. We already know how that's going to end, right? But are we replacing those FBI agents? Not only is it a national security threat, which again is going to affect your money, your bottom line, your pocket. We saw this once before too. My hometown, Miami, when there was too much cocaine coming into the streets in the 80s and there was no way to stop it. What do? You hire more cops. But this isn't a push of a button. Maybe get one of Elon Musk's teenagers to do the background check. Excuse me, it wasn't a push of a button. You can do a background check. That didn't exist. It takes too much time. So they were hiring anybody off the street that came in and applied. What happened? Yeah, people with criminal records applying, whether from Cuba or anywhere else. These people were criminals and now they were cops. Now they're criminals with badges. What did that do? A whole other level of corruption. And so it's the same thing. If there's less FBI agents out in the street, we are less safe. That is not good economically, and obviously it's not good for us in any way when it comes to our protection. But bottom line is, it all affects you. Next time you read an article about an FBI purge or rebuilding the Gaza Strip, Halliburton 2.0 with Dick Cheney, this time it's with President Trump, ask yourself, will this affect me? And then start thinking, how is this going to affect me? And then that's how you get prepared for what might be coming down the road. All right. Any questions or comments, let me know. Thank you for listening. I hope you're enjoying my coffee, morning coffee with me, Professor Alex. I'll have another one out tomorrow. Like I said, I wanted to do one topic every day. Seems impossible these days, right? But I'll keep coming back at you, and tomorrow will be another day. Take care.